So today we are having fun and keeping things simple. I've had a stressful morning of painting and sort of failing at painting, and this is my remedy. So if you are in that kind of mental artistic block, you just want to relax and sketch loose, here is a perfect video for you. We'll be being abstract. I'll be talking about what abstract means in this kind of scene, and we'll just be playing with shapes, colours, watercolours flowing everywhere, and basically producing something fun. And in the end, I think actually I'm pretty proud of it. I'm pretty happy with what I've done, and that's the first time I can say that today, and that's because I just relaxed and sketched. For me, I actually spent an hour before this filming, and I had masking taped up my page. I did lots of thumbnails, and when I pulled off the masking tape, everything ripped. So I got a bit frustrated. And this is the kind of loose and light sketching that I've just decided is going to relax me and take the stress away. So I hope that it's going to do the same for you if you need that. And if not, you'll just see that there is other ways of sketching. You do not have to be tight. You do not have to be sort of, boring's the wrong word, but you can just have fun and let loose. If you like this style of sketching, if you want to play more with ink, with watercolours, come join me on sketchloose.co.uk, where I've got some in-depth courses all about my style. And with that, all we need to do is get the reference, which is down below, get some watercolours, and of course, some kind of waterproof pen, whether that's a fountain pen or a fine liner or a rollerball pen. Lots of different ways of having waterproof ink. And we can just go. I'm using some good quality 425 gram per square metre watercolour paper. It's got a light texture. And we've got this amazing scene. The amazing scene linked down below, as I said before. Now, in a scene like this, there's a lot of complexity and scariness, isn't there? All these rocks and things. We have to decide how important they are to us. And for me, we'll work that one out. But actually, what's easy to start with? Well, in the sort of mid-ground, we've got these lovely houses, these things we can imagine as blocks of colour already. So I'm going to start with those and just get in these initial shapes. We've got these big red rectangular shapes, haven't we? Then in front of them we've got this kind of pink shape coming on here. And we've got a little cream one behind it. Then we've got a white one, which is more of a sort of cylinder with another actually rectangle, and all I'm doing is finding these sort of hopefully clear shapes in this background and finding them, looping them around. It doesn't have to be exact, you know, it doesn't have to be precise, but the ideas are all hopefully sort of just there coming together, and a little feel for the perspective. So we've got these are all big kind of, well, basically cuboids, aren't they? Big rectangles, but they're 3D. So getting that feel for that 3D nature, getting a little feel for the texture. So we got this weird wooden thatchy feeling roof in the back here, so we just change the texture so it doesn't all feel like it's the same thing. Same here, we got little like awnings, so we just change the texture of our line. And all the time, for me, I'm just doing a single line. Now if you want to know why I'm doing a single line, you can find my video about why I like single lines, and the answer is just because I really like them. Now there's lots of good reasons to use continuous lines, like pushing yourself, like creating a sort of connected feel, like simplifying. There's good reasons not to use them if you don't like them, you don't find them enjoyable, you want to be really precise. But for me, they're a really lovely form of sketching. And like that, we've kind of got the village in. And I know it looks loose and abstract, and it is loose and abstract, but we can build in more detail if we want. The next thing, though, is to sort of just come under, and we can find all these trees. We've got all these trees which are kind of sitting in front of parts of our village, and that's going to stop us having to over-explain what's going on at the bottom. And this will also link nicely into those scary rocks, the bits which are, you know, very difficult. They are not easy to get in. So we can come under, we've got this coming around here, little sort of, now just a bit of landscape. And that is kind of the shape, the feel, the flow for me of that top line of our greenery. And now from here we can decide how much we want underneath. So I'm going to start just by simply kind of mapping out the shapes, trying to make it feel different to that greenery, so more geometric. and just get the general flow. As we come closer to us, the rocks get bigger. We have a few sort of standing out rocks. And I don't want this whole sort of feel of all of these rocks in, but just some of the ideas that they're coming towards us. And some of them are actually really close, like this big one in the foreground. And I wonder, do we actually need more than that? And that is a question that you need to ask yourself as much as I need to ask myself. So do we need more than this, or have we got enough detail in that our colours can now sort of flow and shine? With that, let's just actually take a step back from the rocks and go back into our village. So what we can start doing is finding some of the small shapes. I've got all these windows that we can add in. We've got windows galore on these cylindrical shapes, which will hopefully start explaining a little bit more of the perspective going on. And as we build in this detail, it's going to get a bit more, well, I could say messy, and I was going to then correct myself, but no, messy is probably the answer, isn't it? It's going to get more messy, going to be a lot more going on, and that's okay. We're sort of getting the idea of this calamitous feeling village, loads of lovely colours, very pretty, but it's also a bit messy, isn't it? The way that all these shapes are just everywhere, all sort of higgledy-piggledy. We can find a few more sort of textural lines. We can also now start looking at shadows. So maybe to make it even, not purposely to make it even more messy, but being aware that we are going to make it more messy, we just come in and we just apply some more of our lines here. And that will start explaining even more, hopefully, about what's going on with our perspective, which objects are facing in which directions, and leaving some of that lovely light. And now we're getting this idea of this focal point, like definitely building up, isn't it? Because with all this line is coming something to really draw your eye. And now we can start looking around and deciding, well, is there enough on the page? I'm going to suggest there's one more thing to do. So I'm going to actually sort of create a few more rocks. There's a bit too much space here for me. So I'm just finding the ideas. We've got this is abstract really. This is finding the ideas, the shapes that I see. And what I'm meaning is I'm seeing these blocks of shadow. We can again just hatch them in very simply. And I'm seeing these blocks of light. And instead of trying to do a realistic representation of that, so actually drawing the exact thing I see, I'm doing the abstract version. And abstract is where you don't focus on realism, you don't focus on the exact image. What you do is you focus on the shapes, or the colours, or the feeling. So here, for me, I've simplified out what I perceive as the kind of shapes and the shadows that those shapes are forming. Or that perhaps I should say the shapes that the shadows are forming. Getting stuck in my way of thinking there, aren't I? And just a little bit more hatching. So now we've got this flow through the scene. And what you can think of is you've got this spiral running around the scene. So as the spiral's really close, it's where your focal point is, and then it flows out. If we look here, the spiral comes around here, and then it flows out less and less and more and more and more and more, and everything's here. And that's what you call the Fibonacci spiral. And for me, that's a really nice way to compose scenes. And you can see that's basically what we've done. And that's why it now, for me, feels something towards all right. I never like to say things are amazing, but for me, it feels all right. And that's great. So now we're going to continue our little flourishes of fun with some splashes of colour. And this is what I always call loose colours, the first stage of applying colour to the page. And there's nothing much looser than just going and splashing a load on. So I've got a mix here of chromium, cerulean blue, chromium, and cobalt blue as well. Now I've got a video coming out about toxic watercolours, and to be honest, it's a sort of video about mistakes that I have made with my watercolours, and hopefully by admitting my mistakes, people can avoid making the same mistakes as me, or at least for as long as I've made the mistakes, which is very silly of me, very embarrassing. and you'll find out a lot more in my upcoming video. Now the reason I mention this is because I'm using here cerulean blue, chromium, cobalt blue and cobalt green. Now all of these colours have toxins in, and I was half aware of this but not fully thinking about it. So it's really important that we actually are more aware than I was, and that we're aware of the health implications for ourselves and the health implications for the environment and animals and the water systems. So check out my upcoming video if you want to know a bit more about how to sort of safely dispose of your colours, safely use your colours. Anyway, I won't bore you with that anymore, but I'm now aware of something I should have been far more aware of far earlier. I used a bit of quinacridone in. Hopefully you can see there's just this kind of flow of colours coming down the page, and what we need to do later is pull out these really bright colours. But initially, if we were sort of oil painting or doing our acrylics or something like that, this would be the kind of blocking in phase where you're just getting in big areas of that kind of underlying tone. I'm going to half link between here and here. So half get the sea and the sky linking, perhaps with a little flourish of brown even, just to kind of I don't even know what I'm trying to describe there, but to give it an extra kind of punch, basically, an extra something which isn't just blue throughout. Again, same here, just adding a bit of quinacridone and a bit of sepia, just to give a bit of variety coming through these kind of rocky areas. And you'll notice, yes, these rocks are not the colour I've painted them, but that's not what is important to me. Important to me is the feel, balancing the colours and how they sort of work together. And for me, this palette I have built because for me it's a nice balance. It's a nice balance of warmth, cool. It's got lots of blues in because that's what I like. It's got my bright punchy reds because that's what I like. And so I like those colours on the page rather than strictly representing the scene. And like that, I'm going to do one more thing before we set it aside. So that is to start finding those punchy colours. So I've got my Hansa yellow, and that is just going to come in as a little swash across the middle. We've then got these nice pinks in the background, so that will be a little bit of Scarlet Lake just coming across the relevant houses. What I'm hoping for is actually that some of these colours kind of bloom and mix up and blend into the sky. I want that flow from sky to building, because for me, and down as well into the trees, because for me that's where it gets really fun. I'm then going to take the deep, it's almost a scarlet red in the background, and I'm going to use a bit of Perylene Violet to suggest that something different to that Scarlet Lake. And again, hoping that things will blend and merge, that we'll have a sort of unified wash of colour, not just one boring colour. Then I'm going to mix a little bit of my brown, and with that brown I'm going to find these roofs, these sort of natural feeling roofs. And the brown will then hopefully also blend up into the sky. Lastly, just to get a bit more feeling of these shadows on these white houses, I've got a bit of that brown, a little bit of chromium blue, and those shadows I'll just make something a bit more of, so they're standing out from the background of the sky. Might use that same shadow actually in some of these rocks as a little starter before we come back and we add our bolder colours, and just coming in to provide a little bit of shadow whilst the sea's still wet. We can get that rippling effect, and a little bit of cobalt blue can drop in as well, because that richness in that blue will also provide that sort of suggestion of rippling. Anything else, a little bit of blue into some of these shadows, again, that just lifts it, just lifts the whole feeling for me. And there we go, that is our loose colours done. Now we need to let that have a really good dry, and when it's really nice and dry, what we'll be able to do is add on some bolder colours, a little bit more pen, and everything will hopefully sort of come together as much as an abstract painting needs to come together. That is to say, it will look great, it will be fun, but it won't be perfect. So we've now got a really nice and dry page, a little bit of dampness in a couple of places, And we can see everything's a bit flatter. So now is our chance to correct that, make it more interesting and lively again. Now I could do everything again with this same brush, this big sort of quill brush, and use lots of paper and things to keep it controlled. Oops, dropping water everywhere. But instead, what I'm going to do is go back here, and I'm going to pick out a smaller brush. So now I've got here a size 6 brush. And with that size 6 brush, we can suddenly add real punches of colour. And that's important for me for this scene. Because look at it, it's just all about these bright, punchy colours. You notice as we do that, we lose some of that shadow. So I'm going to start injecting a bit of variation into our colours to get that shadow sort of still feeling good. Again here, let's take a bit more of our blue and just really pull out these kind of shadows here. What we don't necessarily need to do is block down the whole building. We can, but what we could do instead is leave these kind of varied shadows, this varied feeling. And then we got the same for our browns here. And it doesn't really matter if these shadows are perfect or, I mean, it's all about just getting that nice variety for me. So I'm not seeking to make these like absolutely perfect, really neat. These blocks of colour, we'll soften them in a minute, and they'll hopefully just become a nice bit of fun. So the softening can start now that we've laid down most of our colour. Just get some water on the brush and bring that water in. Move things, let them flow. Same up here, we've got these browns, we can let them flow down a bit. Let these blend and merge down here. Let this blend and merge. We can even just add some yellow sort of splodges coming out. And the other bit, which I think is quite important here, is if we mix up some shadow, that's a bit of brown, a bit of blue, we mix up a nice bit of shadow, we can just block in some of our windows. Just little touches, tiny touches in a few places to get that variety. Maybe even enhance some of the shadows again with that just real depth of shadow coming through. A little bit there. And then coming forward again, we've got our rocks. So that same really bold shadow can come in here. We're kind of missing a bit of life into some of this foreground because suddenly there's so much boldness everywhere else. Now we don't want the foreground to jump too far forward. It's not actually the focal point here. But what we can do is just little flicks, little kind of marks like so. Again, just soften them. Let them just do a little bit of heavy lifting, let's say. Have a bit of fun themselves. In the very foreground, in the sea, we can come in and using a brush like this, we're going to be able to almost dry brush in some textures. Careful not to overdo this. We don't want it, again, really busy and overtaking things. But a little bit can be a really nice touch. Some of these shadows I'm just going to let seep forward, touch in little bits of bright blue. Again, just to lift things. And then last but not least, a few of these splashes around. Again, maybe some more yellow splashes might be nice. And certainly we've got room for some green up here, haven't we? So little bits of green touching in and around, creating even little textures, little bits of busyness. And then, having played around, again we just need to let it dry. So that's the bold colours done. When this is dry, we'll come back with our pen and things will just start to look great. And here we go. So we can come back in with our pen. And this is what I call restructuring. And what we're going to do is just find key outlines. Because with some of these thick, bold colours, some of the outlines of the actual original ink get a bit lost. And that can lose some of the structure and it can make it very abstract, not a problem, but sometimes it can become a bit hard to understand. Suddenly, with some bolder outlines, just finding those key shapes again, hopefully you'll feel that these buildings kind of come forwards. And these bold outlines also, they jump in front of the hatching and they make it feel potentially less busy. Despite it being more ink, it's less busy because these kind of other ink lines feel more distant, they feel more faint in the background. So just some quite specific line work now. outlining how the colours have ended up, not necessarily how they were intended, but how they've ended up. And again, the same thing can be applied to some of these trees to give a firm outline to the bottom of this kind of villagey scene. Or not sure if it's really, I keep calling it a village, but is it a village when it's got so much kind of big buildings? I suppose it still can be. I'll leave that to you guys to decide. Just a thought though, isn't it? Is it really a village if it's got so many big buildings? Maybe it's a small town, or maybe it's a big town and I can only see part of it in my photo here. Or the photo, it's not my photo, I should say, it's from Unsplash, it's the photo I'm using. Again, just a few extra lines. Don't want to get too busy and detract attention from our sort of focal area. And a little bit of boldness in this foreground. Because here we just kind of separate out land and sea. And like so, pop my signature, my initials, and I'm going to call that one Happily Done. If you enjoyed that, do like, subscribe. You can find the videos I mentioned linked down below. And of course, join me in the next one. So thank you everyone for watching my little sketching videos. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel because it makes me really, really happy. Thanks again.